and I'm very excited to interview today Rama Pauzi. She covers, Malaysian politics and Malaysian news in general for Quick Hits. She's worked previously. She's worked with Al Jazeera and Newsweek, partially like various news organizations in New York, and I'm very excited to have her join me today. I think before I begin the session with Rama, I wanted to first pay a small tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's been such an inspiration to so many women across the world, and unfortunately, she passed away yesterday at the age of 27. She was battling cancer for a long time, but she left, this legacy behind as far as women's empowerment goes. So I just wanted to read out this quote that I love um, um, about something that I struggle with as well as a woman, about having it all. So I'm just going to read it out. So she said, the notorious RBG, you can't have it all at once. Who, man or woman, has it all at once? Over my lifespan, I think I've had it all, but in different periods of time, things were rough. And if you have a caring life partner, you help the other person when that person needs it. Um, it's just such an important quote for a lot of us women who want to have it all, and it's difficult to sort of navigate in this culture of the male dominated society culture that is prevalent. So this quote really sticks and hits me really hard. Okay, so back to the broadcast. We're
I just
discussing
wanted to
till
say
that.
that was a great point, Richa, and I think like another thing to look at it is the fact that how she was also like very realistic and full of wisdom to be telling you that you can have it all, but like by putting it in context, right, and making sure that we're not always trying to like think that everything can happen on its own all at once, and making sure that there are steps to take and all that. I think that puts like a really good context to what we do day to day, especially for women trends. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Okay, so Rama, I wanted to start with, first and foremost, um, I wanted to discuss this youth political movement, the rise of, young politicians in Malaysia right now. Um, so I think just to give a little background, um, can you tell us about what this movement is? Because we've seen this movement come up in many countries across the world. There is the Future Forward Party in Thailand, which has been at the front and center of, protests and pro-democracy youth groups. There's also La République en Marche, which is a youth political group that was started in France under Emmanuel Macron in 2016. So we've seen a lot of these groups come up. Also, hashtag Milk Tea Alliance that was started in Southeast Asia by activists across Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Thailand. And now we see a similar kind of movement also rising and coming up in Malaysia. So, can you tell us why that has happened first?
Right. Yeah. So I think, Richa, there's a clear. I think COVID kind of escalated this process, but I think over the past, I think 5 years or like 10 years ago, the youth has like I think more footprint and more I think tools to access information. So these people are empowered, as early as like 15 years old. They know what gets debated in parliament every day as early as like 13 years old, 14 years old. Very different from what happened to me, for example. When I was 13, my main source of information was the newspapers. So I think the technology definitely kind of I think escalated that, and social media also like escalated that. um, However, I would also like to, put this in perspective, the fact that Malaysia is actually a really young country. And what I mean by that is that the median age for this country is actually between, I think, mid 20s to like early 30s, and that was like back in 2009, 2010. So I'm guessing that they're like I think the median right now seems to be a lot more like I think 18 to 19 and to like 30 years old. So with this access, with access of information, right, and they no longer need to like tune into like, mainstream media, and I think more and more they're beginning to realize, and also like I think like traditional values and like dynamic between generations have changed over the years. And I think there's like not just like one way of like doing things. And I think this is something that the students are realizing. So to also kind of like put it in another context, the fact that we managed to have like a regime change for the first time ever, but 3 years ago, I think that kind of empowered the youth in some in some ways to say that like although it took like 60 years, it did change, right? And I think the fact that we had a little bit of like like a tiny coup, but it was like, still very problematic in the for everyone, and I think that kind of put this movement back on track in the sense that people got like riled up again, and the whole COVID-19, so Parliament was not in session for like a good 6 months, and the fact that everyone was trying to avoid going to Parliament because they said that. I mean, of course, like the government also did not want to like show as if they could not answer some questions and whatnot, and but then everyone was like, you can just like do it by Zoom, but because a lot of these people were quite old, so they did not want to do it. So I think that's like I think maybe like 20, 30 years ago, there's a very similar sentiment going on. However, today you are being validated and people keep telling you that this is not okay, or like if you feel that way, you can voice it out. So I think that's like concepts of like empowerment that's not only unique to Malaysia, but at the very least to across Asia.
That's very interesting, Rama. But I also want to understand what are some of these key issues that the young people in Malaysia are sort of fighting for. I understand. I think you did mention, if I heard you correctly, Said Sadin bin Said Abdul Rahman, who was the first, the youngest, federal politician ever elected in Malaysia. He was the first youngest former youth and sports minister 2 years ago in 2018. He won the elections, and right now he's at the front and center of the movement in Malaysia as well. So I really, I think even our viewers would like to know what are these issues that the young people in Malaysia are fighting for.
Mm-hmm. So I think before I go there, I think I'm just gonna like lay out. There are three different movements right now that are ongoing. So first is in the 18, which is like a movement to try to like lower the voting age to 18 years old. Currently, you have to be 21 years old in order to vote. But then there's so many people between 18 and 21 years old that can vote, and they do know that if these people are allowed to vote, then that they can that they can change things. So there's that one movement, realizing that there's that vacuum and that these people really care about many things. And the technology definitely have moved their aspirations to, or renewed their aspirations in some ways. Um, and the second thing is Parliament Digital, which is quite funny because literally the reason why they were brought forward because they think that the regular parliamentarians just do not know how to have I think good debate, and I do know how to like do this thing rationally, right? Without really yelling at each other and all that, and like took like days or like, weeks or months to like, try to approve something. So what ended up happening was that this is just a group of like if I'm not mistaken, many of them are debaters in public universities and private universities, and these people just like organize I think one session just as like a way to follow political literacy for their peers on Facebook and Zoom, and was live, and they were debating about the things. I'm thinking one of the things was like banning of child marriage, because right now we have like an overwhelming issue of child marriage currently happening in Malaysia, and we've been trying to abolish the act that allowed this to happen for like years already. And I think that was like growing frustrating. So basically, they were just trying to show that hey, this is how it's done. And the third thing is this new political party that was formed by Said Sadiq, who is the former Minister of Youth and Sports, like you mentioned. So Said Sadiq was a part of like the reform government that got overthrown through a backdoor deals, and it was post trading that was going on. I think if you can do this like back in February. So he kind of like lost his position after that transition took place. That backdoor deals took place. So he was one of the people who got left out and basically got kicked out of his position. So this is like he ended up like I think like over the past 3 years like humbling and like getting like learning and getting yelled at by these like older politicians. I think he ended up like thinking that hey, they are the youth are the majority and they have very specific concerns. Yes, it's true that we are very diverse, but they have very specific concerns that you feel to like youth empowerment and leadership and I think access to good, career, access to I think using the salary and all that. These are very real thing and very common among these people. So he started a new party. I think about less than a week ago. So that's like kind of like the ending tie that the ending knot that not all of this like movement has been happening over the past few years. So yeah.
It's so interesting because the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, was 95 years old when he left office, and your current Prime Minister, who is Muhyiddin Yassin, he's 73 years old, and if I understand correctly, and you can tell me, he's considered as like one of the younger politicians in the mix right now because if you compare him to the former Prime Minister, Dr. Mohamad, who was 95 years old, the 73-year-old Prime Minister Yassin actually comes across as like a sprightly young man. I think you talked about this being an elite, like an elitist, politicians who
Right.
sort of have been around for so long, and the lower and the middle income groups in Malaysia, and that's why you have these young people who belong to that community, that socio-economic strata of the Malaysian population, sort of rising against this, sort of defying and denouncing the political, powerful, elite, rich class.
Right.
So that's very interesting. I would like to understand, Rama, from you, how does race and gender and even religion play a role in all of this? Because Malaysia is a very diverse country with religions from all across the spectrum. You have Muslims and Malays and Hindus even. So just tell us, is there any sort of intersection as far as like gender, race, and religion go in these political youth movements?
hmm Yeah. So to contextualize, so we were also from a British colony. So one thing, a very famous move that this former colonial masters pulled was like obviously divide and rule. And one thing that's like the easiest to do that was that so British came I think like 1800 before that Portuguese were here, Japanese were here, but Malaysia or Malaya, which is what was known at that time, had always been this like trading ground. So like I think traditionally and historically we've always been this like very multiracial country or state. So what British ended up doing was that they divided. So the Malays were kind of like the indigenous, like at least native to the area, to the like Southern Asian region. So we call it like Malay Archipelago. So southern Thai, I think southern Philippines, Indonesia, kind of like of the same land. And then I think Indians were brought over from India by British to work on the rubber estates, and the Chinese traders are always been here, and then and they opened the door for them to come and trade and whatnot. But when we were about to gain independence, one thing the British did was to make sure that this division remained. And what they ended up doing was make, establish or approve of political or like race-based parties. So there were like Malay parties, and there were like Chinese parties, and there were like I think Indian political parties. And while there were other permutation or like parties that were mixed race, they were not approved by the British. because to them that's like, that's like a symbol of unity, so they don't want that to happen. So we ended up inheriting this kind of like, if I may say, toxic, the way of like dealing with things, which is like, ways with running instead of like needs-based politics, right? And so since then, everything has been like around race, and they were like, different like special privileges that were like given to Malays who were like, immigrant to the land, although a lot of them probably need it. But had it been more like, class-based or needs-based politics, the policies would be more centered to actually rebuild the country. So it has become like a burden to Malaysia over the past 60 years, needing to deal with this, colonial trauma in a way. So what's interesting about this whole movement is that this is, I think the last time, and I'm not sure if this is like necessarily accurate, but one thing to kind of like, read back on is that the last time such youth-oriented movement has ever taken place was probably pre-independence, when everyone was like fighting for the British. So fighting against the British. And it was like, very much in the past, it was passionate, and it was kind of like class-based. So and today, fast forward in 2020, most of the people who are not doing that well economically speaking are youth, right? People in their 20s and 30s struggling to make ends they're youth, but they also happen to be the majority, and also one of the most vulnerable communities in Malaysia, which is ironic. So, and what they are trying to do right now is to eliminate this race-based politics and discussion, and by like making it a much more like class-based or like needs-based, politics. But there are so many things to undo here. This is probably a bit too ideal at this point because people are too used to this kind of politics. But we will see what comes out of it. Yeah.
So, but do you think that, because the younger population in Malaysia, I would imagine they're more progressive as far as like race and gender and all of these things go. We see Saeed, being at the forefront of all of this. Is there any female figure that you can talk about who's also sort of leading the charge as far as the youth politics go in Malaysia?
Yeah, I think I know, like, I think quite a few. However, you're right. There's like, Said Sadiq happens to be one of the, I think, the whole thing about like the male, Malay, urban, English speaking, kind of like put him on the map a little bit. But I do know that there's one other lady, her name is Kyra, who also was the person behind in the 18, which is make sure the movement to try to like lower the voting age to 18 years old. But other than that, there's like not much. But however, I think while the faces are still predominantly male, however, I would think that there are many women who are taking a step forward more and more in that sense. But that's a good question, Richa. I think that's something that I will have to ask Eric next time I see him, because I just saw him last week talking about the same thing. So that's very important to think about.
Do you foresee an early general elections, because there are conversations of that happening possibly? Do you think that if that happens, do you think that the new up and coming youth political parties would have representation as far as like actually electing those leaders goes?
Mm-hmm. So there have been these talks, and I think to contextualize it a little bit is because precisely the government of the day right now don't really have enough seats technically to pass any bill, because they came to power with a lot of horse trading and all that, so it's not necessarily democratic. So there is that fear that they're gonna call out for snap elections, and I think that's a good question, and I think this is why the formation of this new party is more important than ever, because this is when we will see whether or not this can work, right? Whether or not people can take their mind out of race-based politics and be thinking about things that are a bit more like mixed space. However, in my opinion, beyond whether or not it's working, beyond whether or not this party is going to garner that much support, I think the whole thing about just do it, that attitude that leads from like frustration and that whole attitude of like, hey, let me just show you how it's being done. Because been running this for like 50 years, I didn't see it going anywhere. To me, that's the first, and to me, that's the real win. The fact that people know that not only they can do something, but also they can always try whatever and fail and try again is the biggest takeaway out of this movement in my opinion. And for that I think I would love to, just celebrate that possibility that comes with it. Yeah.
Thank you. That is really great, and I mean it's great news. All these populist movements that are coming up across the world, including in the United States as well, with with the election of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and even Bernie Sanders. These are very important movements, and they're not just contrary to popular opinion. They're not just limited to being on the right side of your political affiliation. It can be on both sides. So that's very interesting. Thank you so much for that. I think I would be remiss if we do not talk about COVID in Malaysia. It is the hot topic. Everyone's talking about it. Can you give us like a quick update as far as like cases go and containing the virus and social distancing norms, precautions, and if you can also just sort of shed some light on the economic impact on Malaysian economy.
Right. So we're still struggling. To put it bluntly, I think with borders, although people are allowed to go out and about, and I think these things can go, as unusual, if I may put it like that. Borders still remain closed, and that means that any cargoes, anything that comes that's supposed to come through the borders, will have to go through severe restrictions, right? And that, so for example, we have been getting so many goods from China, right? I think for like the first 3 to 4 months, it really hurt our economy, and we still rely on like China for like a bunch of our commodities, for example. So while people managed to start making money a little bit after the lockdown has been eased a little bit, and it was supposed to end actually. I think what they call it is that um, I think a regulated, if I'm a regulated lockdown or something like that. So people can still go out, and with their thing, like you have to still abide by like really, really strict SOPs, which is like you go to the mall, you have to sanitize, but you cannot open unless you make sure that you record everyone's name, things like that. So whatever we call it new normal, right? And so there's that. However, that was supposed to end on the 31st of August. But the fact that we still have to go through it, and it got extended to the 31st of December, it signals very clearly that we're still quite worried about where we are at, precisely because we are going, we're seeing a lot of spikes right now. And just
Hmm.
today, we saw like, 50 new cases. Before, it was mostly imported cases, and what that means is that it was mostly, the COVID-19 cases came from people who just returned from abroad. And that was the time when we hit zero for like new case, and that was great. Whatever case that was important. However, over the past few weeks, this important cases has managed to find its own cluster, and a lot of it becomes local. And when it's local, that's when I think it's worrying because you don't know where it's at. You cannot curb it. But if you come from overseas and then you just come to the airport, you always make sure that you get checked, right? So these people who do not know that they have COVID and they're going out and about, and I guess that's what making it worse right now. So I think right now we're still like being very wary. People, are still a lot of companies are still thinking about should we still let people work from home or should we, get them to come back. Like for example, where I work, we're doing this alternate week where 1 week we go to work and 1 week we work from home, and then we have like another team that would be at at the office when we are at home. So I think so right now we're doing talks, but I'm not sure because maybe I still don't feel that safe. Because mask is mandatory right now. Sanitizing your hand is mandatory right now, and you can actually get fined if you don't get mask on for 1,000 ringgit, and they are still on it. So that's good, but I also know that not many people are abiding with, by these rules. So we'll see. So it's still hard. It's still hard.
Yeah, I think people are kind of getting complacent with the virus. It's been what 6+ months now, and the entire world has been sort of grappling with this. I think things are slowly opening back up across the world. So I think we are seeing a lot of complacency sort of slip in as well. But I think we'll just have to, like you said, wait and see how things pan out. Of course, United States and India are the worst hit countries right now. So I think we're sort of right at top when it comes to that. So hopefully we'll be able to contain it at some point. But thank you so much for joining me, Rama. This was great. I think we got a lot of good information out. And I hope that the viewers enjoy whatever we discussed today. Thank you for joining me, and from
Thank you so much.
Malaysia.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you're taking care of yourself over there.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.